The rancher ordered a bride, but her sister stepped off the stagecoach instead. The dust cloud appeared on the horizon exactly at noon, and Jake Murphy felt his stomach twist into knots. The stagecoach was coming, carrying the woman who was supposed to save his ranch from ruin. He'd sent letters to Catherine Miller for 3 months, carefully crafting each word, painting a picture of Montana life that was honest but hopeful. Her responses had been warm, intelligent, full of the kind of strength he needed in a wife. Now she was minutes away, and he was about to meet her for the first time. The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the general store, throwing up a wall of dust that made Jake squint. He stepped forward, hat in hand, rehearsing his greeting one more time. The driver climbed down and opened the door with a creak of old hinges. A woman emerged, and Jake's prepared words died in his throat. This wasn't Catherine Miller. The woman who stepped down wore Catherine's described blue traveling dress, but everything else was wrong. Catherine's letters had mentioned her height, her dark hair, her 28 years. This woman was shorter, her hair a lighter brown with hints of gold, and she couldn't be more than 22. Her eyes were green instead of brown, and they darted around nervously before landing on him. "Mr. Murphy?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Where's Catherine?" Jake demanded, unable to keep the edge from his voice. The woman's face went pale. "I'm so sorry." "I'm her sister, Emma. Catherine got married 2 weeks ago to a shopkeeper in Philadelphia. She didn't want to disappoint you, so she asked me to come instead. She said you needed a wife desperately, and I was willing, and she thought maybe you wouldn't mind the switch." Jake's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Around them, townspeople had started to gather, whispering behind their hands. Old Betty Carson from the boarding house was already smirking, no doubt ready to spread this humiliation across 3 counties by nightfall. "Wouldn't mind?" Jake said quietly. "Dangerously. Your sister made promises. We had an agreement." "I know, and I'm truly sorry," Emma said, clutching her small bag tighter. "But I can work just as hard. I can cook, clean, help with cattle, whatever you need. Catherine taught me everything. I even brought her recipes and her notes about ranch life." "This isn't about recipes," Jake snapped. He looked at the stagecoach driver. "When's the next coach back east?" 3 days, the driver said, avoiding eye contact. 3 days. Jake ran his hand through his hair, thinking fast. The bank manager was coming tomorrow to assess the ranch. He'd promised a stable household, a wife, to help run things properly. Without that, the loan extension was dead, and he'd lose everything his father had built. Emma was watching him with those 2 green eyes, hope and fear mixing on her face. "Please," she whispered. "I have nowhere else to go." Jake stared at her for a long moment, anger warring with practicality. He'd been backed into a corner by Catherine's deception, and now this stranger stood before him claiming she could fill shoes she'd never tried on. But the hard truth was simple. He needed a wife by tomorrow, and the next stagecoach wouldn't arrive in time to find another option. "Get your things," he said curtly. "We'll sort this out at the ranch." Relief flooded Emma's face, but Jake was already walking toward his wagon, not wanting to see it. The crowd dispersed slowly, their whispers following him like gnats. He threw Emma's trunk into the wagon bed with more force than necessary, then climbed up to the driver's seat without offering to help her up. She managed on her own, settling beside him in silence. The ride to the ranch took 40 minutes, and neither of them spoke a word. Jake kept his eyes on the road, his mind racing through calculations and contingencies. The Murphy Ranch sprawled across 5,000 acres of Montana grassland, but sprawling land meant nothing without the capital to stock it properly. His father had taken a bad loan 3 years ago, right before he died, and Jake had been fighting that debt ever since. The bank had finally agreed to extend the loan, but only if Jake could prove stability. A wife meant stability. A household meant responsibility. But this arrangement, this deception, it made everything feel like it was built on sand. When they arrived at the ranch house, Emma finally broke the silence. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Jake looked at his home with critical eyes. The 2-story house needed paint, the fence posts needed replacing, and the barn roof had a hole he'd been meaning to patch for months. Beautiful wasn't the word he'd use. "It needs work," he said flatly. "Just like everything else around here." He jumped down and grabbed her trunk, carrying it up the porch steps. Emma followed, her footsteps light behind him. Inside, the house was clean but sparse. Jake had done his best to tidy up, but a bachelor's idea of presentable was probably different from what she was used to. "The spare room is upstairs, second door on the right," Jake said, setting her trunk down in the hallway. "You can settle in there." Emma's eyebrows rose slightly. "The spare room? We're not married," Jake said bluntly. "And I'm not marrying someone I just met based on her sister's lies. You can stay until the next Stagecoach or longer if you prove useful, but don't expect me to honor an arrangement I didn't agree to. Color rose in Emma's cheeks, but she nodded. That's fair. I'll earn my keep. You'll have your chance tomorrow, Jake said. The bank manager arrives at 10. I need this place looking like a proper household, and I need you to play the part of a competent wife. Can you do that? Yes, Emma said, lifting her chin. I can do that. Jake studied her for a moment, trying to see past his anger at the situation. She was pretty, he'd give her that, but pretty didn't run a ranch. Catherine's letters had shown intelligence and grit. This girl looked like a strong wind might blow her over. There's stew on the stove from yesterday, he said. Help yourself. I've got work to do in the barn. He left before she could respond, needing distance from the disaster his careful plans had become. Outside, the evening air was cool and clean, and he breathed it in deeply. The barn smelled of hay and horses, familiar and comforting. His gelding Duke nickered softly as Jake entered. We're in trouble, boy, Jake muttered, stroking the horse's neck. Real trouble. He'd spent the last 3 months preparing for Catherine. He'd fixed up the spare room, installed new curtains, even bought a decent set of dishes. All for a woman who'd sent her sister as a replacement, like returning defective merchandise. The humiliation burned in his chest. Inside the house, he could see lamplight moving from room to room as Emma explored. She'd pulled her hair back and rolled up her sleeves, and through the window he watched her survey the kitchen with a critical eye. She found the stew, heated it, and ate standing up at the counter. Her movements efficient and practiced. Maybe Catherine had taught her well. Maybe this wouldn't be a complete disaster. But trust was hard to come by when you'd been deceived before you'd even started. Jake worked in the barn until full dark, checking on the horses, inventorying supplies, doing anything to avoid going back inside. When he finally returned to the house, Emma had cleaned the kitchen, swept the floors, and left a plate of warm stew covered with a cloth on the table for him. A note beside it read simply, "Thank you for giving me a chance." He ate in silence, then climbed the stairs to his room. Across the hall, he could see lamplight under Emma's door. He heard her moving around, unpacking probably, settling into a life she'd walked into blind. Tomorrow would tell the tale. The bank manager, Henry Walsh, was a shrewd man who'd known Jake's father. He'd see through any obvious charade. Emma would have to be convincing, and Jake would have to pretend the shambles of a situation was exactly what he'd planned. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house creak and settle. Somewhere down the hall, Emma's lamp went out, and silence fell over the Murphy ranch. One day to pull off a miracle. One day to save everything his family had built. And a stranger sleeping in his spare room was his only hope. Jake woke before dawn to the smell of coffee and bacon. He dressed quickly, confused and wary. Downstairs, Emma stood at the stove, fully dressed, her hair pinned up neatly. The kitchen table was set for two, and she'd found the good tablecloth he'd forgotten he owned. "Morning," she said without turning around. "I hope you don't mind. I found the chickens and gathered eggs. The bacon's from your smokehouse. I wasn't sure what you'd want for breakfast, so I made everything." Jake stared at the spread. Scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh biscuits that were actually rising in the oven, and coffee that smelled better than anything he'd made in months.
"You've been up a while."
"Since 4, Emma admitted. I couldn't sleep." "Nervous about today, I suppose?" She finally turned to look at him. "I know you don't trust me, Mr. Murphy. I know this whole situation is wrong. But I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to help you keep this ranch." "Why?" Jake asked, sitting down at the table. "What's in it for you?" Emma brought the coffee pot over and poured him a cup. "Honestly, I need a fresh start. Catherine got everything back home. The family house, Papa's shop, even the man I thought I might marry. When she asked me to come here instead of her, I saw it as an escape, not a sacrifice." She met his eyes steadily. "Maybe that's selfish. But I'd rather be useful here than invisible there." Her honesty caught him off guard. He'd expected excuses or apologies, not this raw admission. "You thought you'd marry a stranger sight unseen just to get away?" "I thought I'd marry a man who needed help as much as I needed a purpose," Emma corrected. "Catherine's letters painted you as someone honorable who'd fallen on hard times through no fault of his own. That seemed like someone worth taking a chance on." Jake sipped his coffee, buying time to think. "The bank manager comes at 10. His name is Henry Walsh. He knew my father, and he doesn't suffer fools. He'll ask questions about how we met, how long we've been married, what our plans are. We need our stories straight." "Then tell me what to say," Emma said simply. They spent breakfast rehearsing. Jake explained that they'd tell Henry they'd been married quietly in town yesterday, right after Emma arrived. The stagecoach driver could confirm she'd come, and the local minister, Father Douglas, was a kind man who wouldn't contradict them if asked. Emma absorbed every detail, asking smart questions about the ranch's finances and operations. "How many head of cattle do you run?" she asked. 150 now. Should be 300 to make the ranch profitable. And the loan? $5,000. My father borrowed it to expand, but he died before he could make it work. Bank wants proof I can turn a profit before they'll extend the terms. Emma nodded thoughtfully. What would make this place profitable? More cattle, obviously, but what else? Jake found himself talking, really talking, about his plans. Better grazing rotation, a breeding program for quality stock, maybe some horses on the side. Emma listened with complete focus, occasionally jotting notes on a scrap of paper she'd found. By 9:30, the house looked transformed. Emma had opened windows to air everything out, arranged wildflowers in a jar on the table, and somehow made the shabby furniture look almost charming. She'd changed into a simple green dress that brought out her eyes, and she moved through the space like she'd lived there for years. "You're good at this," Jake admitted grudgingly. "I ran my father's household for 6 years after Mama died," Emma said. "Catherine got married and moved out, but I stayed. It's what I know." At exactly 10 o'clock, Henry Walsh's buggy rolled up the drive. Jake's stomach tightened, but Emma just smoothed her skirt and walked to his side. As they stepped onto the porch together, she slipped her hand into his. Her palm was warm and slightly rough from work. "We can do this," she whispered. Henry climbed down from his buggy, a portly man in his 50s with sharp eyes behind wire spectacles. "Jake," he called out, "good to see you. And this must be the bride I've heard about." "Emma Murphy?" Emma said, stepping forward with a smile that looked completely genuine. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Walsh. Jake's told me so much about you." "Has he now?" Henry's eyes twinkled. "All good, I hope. He said you were the fairest banker in Montana and that his father trusted you completely." Henry's expression softened. "Your father was a good man, Jake. I miss him. Now, shall we talk business, or will you show me around first?" "Let's walk," Jake said. "I want you to see what we've been doing." They toured the property, Henry asking probing questions about stock numbers, feed costs, and market prices. Jake answered confidently, aware of Emma walking slightly behind them, her presence a steady reminder of what was at stake. When Henry asked about winter preparations, Emma spoke up. "We're planning to expand the hay storage," she said smoothly. Jake explained that last winter was hard because the old barn couldn't hold enough. "We're looking at building an addition before the first snow." Henry glanced at her with approval. "A practical woman. That's good. A ranch needs that." Back at the house, Emma served coffee and the biscuits she'd made, along with fresh jam she'd somehow found time to make from preserved berries. Henry ate with obvious pleasure, and Jake felt something in his chest unclench slightly. "I'll be honest, Jake," Henry said, setting down his cup. "I had my doubts. Young man, big ranch, no family. But seeing you here with Emma, seeing how you've planned this out together, I'm inclined to approve that extension." Jake's heart leaped, but he kept his expression neutral. "I appreciate that, Henry." "There's one condition," Henry continued. "I want to see real progress in 6 months. Show me you can grow this operation, and the bank will back you long term." "You have my word," Jake said firmly. Henry stood, shaking Jake's hand and tipping his hat to Emma. "Welcome to Montana, Mrs. Murphy. Something tells me you're exactly what this ranch needed." After Henry left, Jake and Emma stood on the porch watching the dust from his buggy settle. Emma's hand found his again, squeezing once before letting go. "We did it," she said quietly. "You did it," Jake corrected. "I just stood there." Emma turned to face him, and something had shifted in her expression. "No. We did it together. And if you'll let me, I'd like to keep doing it. Really doing it, not pretending." Jake looked at this woman who'd stepped off a stagecoach yesterday and somehow saved his life today. Maybe Catherine had done him a favor without meaning to. Maybe what he'd ordered wasn't what he'd needed after all. That afternoon, Jake rode out to check the north pasture fence, needing time alone to process everything that had happened. Emma had transformed his house, charmed the banker, and played her role so perfectly that even he'd almost believed it. But believing it and building a real life on it were two different things entirely. When he returned at sunset, he found Emma in the barn with Duke, brushing the gelding with long, confident strokes. The horse stood calm and content, which was unusual. Duke didn't trust easily. "He likes you," Jake said from the doorway. Emma jumped slightly, then smiled. "I've always been good with animals. We had horses back home before Papa sold them to pay Catherine's wedding costs." A shadow crossed her face. "Sorry, I shouldn't complain about my sister." "She lied to me," Jake said, walking into the barn. "You can complain all you want," Emma resumed, brushing Duke. "Catherine wasn't trying to hurt you. She just takes what she wants and assumes everyone else will adjust. It's how she's always been. And you just adjust?" "I used to." Emma's hand stilled on Duke's flank. "Not anymore. That's why I'm here." Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm that felt almost natural. Emma rose before dawn to cook breakfast. Jake worked the land and tended the cattle. They ate dinner together, discussing ranch business like actual partners. At night, they retreated to separate rooms. The hallway between them a careful distance neither tried to cross, but small things kept catching Jake off guard. The way Emma sang softly while kneading bread. How she'd repaired his torn work shirt without being asked. The fact that she could discuss cattle breeding with surprising knowledge, thanks to books she'd read. On the 8th day, trouble arrived. Jake was mending fence when he saw riders approaching. 3 men on horseback, and he recognized the lead rider immediately. Clayton Briggs owned the neighboring ranch, twice the size of the Murphy spread, and he'd made offers to buy Jake out 4 times in the past year. Each time, Jake had refused. "Murphy," Clayton called out, reining his horse to a stop. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and confident, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the cruel set of his mouth. "Heard you got yourself a wife." "News travels fast," Jake said evenly, setting down his tools. "Always does. Thought I'd ride over and meet her." Clayton's eyes glittered with something Jake didn't like. "Heard she's a pretty little thing. Mail-order bride from back east." "My wife's not your concern, Clayton. Everything in this valley is my concern, boy. Your daddy knew that." "Shame you never learned." Clayton dismounted, his men following suit. "Why don't you introduce us?" "It's the neighborly thing to do." Jake's jaw tightened. He could refuse, but that would only make Clayton more determined. The man fed on confrontation like a wolf on wounded prey. "She's at the house. I'll introduce you there." They rode back to the ranch, Clayton talking the whole way about his own spread, his profits, his plans to expand. The message was clear. Clayton had everything Jake didn't, and he wanted to make sure Jake knew it. Emma was hanging laundry when they arrived. She looked up, and Jake saw her read the situation instantly. Her posture shifted, becoming more formal, more guarded. "Emma, this is Clayton Briggs," Jake said, "our neighbor to the west. Clayton, my wife, Emma." "Mrs. Murphy," Clayton said, sweeping off his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "It's a pleasure. I was just telling your husband that you're even prettier than folks said." "You're too kind," Emma said coolly. "Would you gentlemen like some water? It's a warm day." "That'd be lovely," Clayton said, following her toward the house without waiting for an invitation. In the kitchen, Emma poured water while Clayton looked around, his gaze assessing and calculating. Cozy place. Must be different from what you're used to back east. "Different can be good," Emma said, handing him a glass. "Can be. Or it can be disappointing." Clayton drank, then set the glass down with a deliberate clink. "See, I've been thinking about your situation, Murphy. You've got a new wife, big dreams, but that loan hanging over your head like a noose? I could take that burden off you. Buy the ranch for a fair price, you two could start fresh somewhere easier." "We're not selling," Jake said flatly. "You sure about that? 6 months from now, when winter's been hard and the bank's breathing down your neck, you might feel different." "And, I might not be feeling so generous then." Emma stepped closer to Jake, a show of solidarity. "We appreciate the offer, Mr. Briggs, but we're building something here." "Something that's ours." Clayton's smile turned sharp. "That's sweet." "Well, young love and all. But love don't pay bills, and it sure don't survive a Montana winter when you're broke and freezing." He looked directly at Emma. "You ever been through a real winter, Mrs. Murphy? The kind where the snow comes up to the windows and you don't see another soul for weeks? It breaks people, especially soft ones from back east." "I'm tougher than I look," Emma said quietly. "We'll see." Clayton put his hat back on. "We'll all see. I give it until Christmas before you're begging me to take this place off your hands." He tipped his hat to Emma with mock politeness. "Nice meeting you, ma'am. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again soon." After Clayton and his men rode off, Jake and Emma stood in silence. Finally, Emma spoke. "He's going to cause problems, isn't he?" "Probably," Jake admitted. Clayton doesn't like losing, and he sees this ranch as something that should be his. Then we can't let him have it. Emma turned to face Jake, determination blazing in her green eyes. We need to make this work. Really work. No more pretending, no more separate rooms, no more uncertainty. If we're going to fight Clayton Briggs and the bank and Winter and everything else, we need to do it as a real team. Jake studied her face, seeing the steel beneath the softness. What are you saying? I'm saying marry me. For real this time. Not a story for the banker, but an actual commitment. Make me your partner in truth, not just in name. The proposal hung in the air between them, and Jake felt the weight of the choice. Trust someone who'd come to him under false pretenses, or face the coming storms alone? Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The first autumn storm approaching. All right, Jake said finally. We'll do it for real. They married 2 days later in Father Douglas's small church with only the priest and his housekeeper as witnesses. Emma wore the blue traveling dress she'd arrived in, and Jake wore his father's best suit, carefully preserved. The vows felt different this time, heavier with meaning. When Jake slipped a simple gold band onto Emma's finger, her hand trembled slightly in his. That night, Jake moved his things into the master bedroom. Emma was already there, sitting on the edge of the bed, nervous but resolute. They lay side by side in the darkness, not touching, both staring at the ceiling. I'll try to be a good husband, Jake said quietly. I'll try to be a good wife, Emma replied. It wasn't romance, but it was honest. And honest was what they needed. The next months tested them in ways neither had anticipated. October brought early snow that killed half the fall calves. November brought a broken water pump that took Jake 3 days to fix while Emma hauled water from the creek by hand. December brought Clayton Briggs again, this time with an offer half what he'd proposed before, smirking as he delivered it. Offer stands until Christmas, Clayton said. After that, I'll wait for the bank to foreclose and buy it for even less. Emma stood beside Jake on the porch, her hand tight in his. We're not selling. But as Christmas approached, their situation grew desperate. The cattle were thin from the hard winter. The ranch account was nearly empty. And Henry Walsh had sent a letter requesting a progress report that Jake couldn't bear to write. 3 days before Christmas, Emma found Jake in the barn staring at the ledger books with hopeless eyes. It's not going to work, he said flatly. I've run the numbers 10 times. We can't make it to spring, much less show Walsh the progress he wants. Emma took the ledger from his hands and studied it. What if we sold some of the cattle now? Take the loss, but use the money to buy feed for the rest? We'd lose too much value. Winter cattle prices are terrible. What about horses? You said you wanted to try breeding horses. That takes years to show profit. We don't have years. Emma set down the ledger and took Jake's face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me. I didn't come all this way and work this hard to give up now. There has to be something we're not seeing. That night, Emma went through every piece of paper in the house. She found old correspondence, receipts, her father's journals. At 2 a.m, she shook Jake awake. Your father bought water rights, she said breathlessly. Look at this deed. He owned the rights to Murphy Creek, and the creek runs through Clayton's land before it reaches ours. Jake sat up, suddenly alert. What are you thinking? Clayton's been using our water for free. If we enforced the rights, charged him for access, we could have steady income. He'd fight it. Let him. The law is on our side. Emma's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. And if he wants to avoid paying, he could buy the rights from us. For real money. The next morning, Jake rode to town and spoke with a lawyer. The deed was legitimate. The water rights were ironclad. By noon, the lawyer had drafted a letter to Clayton Briggs. Clayton appeared at the ranch the following day, face red with fury. You can't do this. I can and I am, Jake said calmly. You've been using Murphy water for 3 years without compensation. You can start paying the going rate, or you can buy the rights outright. Your choice. You little snake. Your father would be ashamed. My father bought those rights legally. I'm just enforcing what's already mine. Clayton's hand moved toward his gun, and everything went still. Emma stepped out onto the porch, a rifle cradled in her arms with casual competence. I wouldn't, she said softly. I'm an excellent shot, and threatening my husband tends to make me nervous. Nervous people pull triggers. Clayton's hand moved away from his gun. He looked between Jake and Emma, seeing something he hadn't expected. Unity, strength, partnership. How much for the rights? He ground out. $4,000, Jake said. That's fair market value. That's robbery. That's business. You have until tomorrow to decide. After that, you start paying monthly fees. Clayton left without another word, his horse kicking up frozen mud as he rode away. "Did we just do that?" Emma asked, lowering the rifle. "We just did that," Jake confirmed, pulling her into his arms. "Clayton paid the $4,000 2 days before Christmas. Jake deposited $3,000 into the ranch account and used the rest to buy Emma a proper wedding ring and a Christmas gift, a beautiful mare she'd admired in town. On Christmas morning, they sat together at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and watching snow fall gently outside. The ledger books showed black ink for the first time in years. The cattle had survived the worst of winter, and Henry Walsh had sent a congratulatory letter after receiving Jake's progress report. "I was so angry when you stepped off that stagecoach," Jake said quietly. "I thought you were the worst thing that could have happened to me." Emma smiled. "And now? Now I think your sister did me the biggest favor of my life. I wanted someone like Catherine because I thought I needed her strength. But you have your own kind of strength? The kind that sees solutions instead of problems. The kind that doesn't quit." "We make a good team," Emma said. "The best," Jake agreed, pulling her close. Outside, the Montana winter continued its assault, but inside the Murphy ranch house, warmth and hope had taken root. The rancher had ordered a bride, but her sister had stepped off the stagecoach instead, and in doing so, had delivered exactly what he needed. Not what he'd expected. Not what he'd planned for. But exactly, perfectly, what he needed. And together, they would build something neither could have created alone.